Hello, everyone. If you are watching this, then welcome to the live stream of the Bible study for Grace Baptist Church. Today it is May the 27th, and it is currently 6 p.m. Pacific or Los Angeles time. So here in Willamina, Oregon, live streaming. So just thank you for coming. Thank you for participating, whether you're at Grace Baptist Church, or if you don't live in Oregon, or if you do and you don't go to Grace Baptist Church, just thank you for attending and being available to watch this. So we are continuing on in our Bible studies for First Peter, and this week we're going to cover First Peter chapter 5. So we've moved into the last chapter, so we'll see Peter kind of wrapping up his letter as it's coming to a close in this chapter. We've gone quite a bit of ways in these 4 chapters. We have the Metzgers saying hello to everyone, Clay and Jean. So we're glad that they are here watching with us. And if you haven't seen any of the Bible study videos before, definitely look at them and get the whole series that we've done so far on the live stream. But like I said, make sure that you turn to First Peter chapter 5, verses 1 through 5, because those are going to be the verses that we look at today. And we've gotten quite a bit through First Peter, so today we'll see what these 5 verses get us. But before we begin, let us just go to God in prayer. God, I just thank you for this time. Just thank you that you've given us your word, that we can look into it and understand more about you, understand your design for the world, and what makes you happy, and what it means to be righteous and holy, and what you expect of us. God, I just ask that at this time you help us to grow and help us to learn more about you and your word. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, so follow along with me, or just listen as I read 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 through 5. Starts off saying, "So I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders. Clothe yourselves, all of you, with humility toward one another. For God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." So here we see, right before Peter gives his final greetings. This isn't going to be a long chapter. It's only 4 verses, so we really cut a third of it with this passage here. We see as Peter is coming to a close, he's giving his final words of, I urge you, I exhort the elders among you. And so when he exhorts, he's referring to just urging, he's imploring. Same thing that when Paul does several times of, I implore you, I urge you, kind of the same thing if I just really want you to do this. And here we see who Peter is addressing right off the bat as he addresses, so I exhort the elders among you. And he's not so much addressing the mature of age individuals. It's not just elders in the sense of age-wise, but it's really the idea of a religious leader, because elder isn't just used in Christianity of someone who is a leader of the church, but it was used in Judaism and even in pagan religions, and it always encompassed someone who was above the rest, mature in that faith, and would guide others. It was their job to guide. It was their job to perform, the rituals. So elder is a leader of the faith. And usually it does coincide with someone who is advanced, because in order to be an elder as a leader, you need to be very experienced in the religion. You need to know what is taught. You need to know all of the ins and outs. So we know in Christianity, especially at our church in Grace Baptist, we have elders, and they are voted by our congregation, and it is decided upon based on characteristics of an individual. And Paul, in his letters, especially in Timothy, gives characteristics of an elder, and all of those really encompass a mature Christian, usually a male, and it's a mature Christian, someone who isn't, as we'll see, quick to give over to their emotions, someone who is, living a righteous life. Because it makes sense, because as Peter is urging them, he's urging them to live accordingly, and especially to be an example. And it's hard to be an example for people. It's hard to encourage, especially a righteous living, if you're not doing it yourself. It would be really hard to be an elder and to shepherd and to guide if you're an alcoholic, if you're gambling all your money away, you're living on all sorts of idolatry, and I can go on. And if you're doing all of that, you really can't tell other people, oh, okay, you need to live a righteous life. You need to be obedient to God, because then it's pretty obvious that you're not. So we know in this passage who Peter is addressing at the moment. He's addressing the elders among you to his audience. And then after he's addressed, that he's speaking directly to the elders among them, he kind of gives a little bit of kind of his credentials, as he says, as a fellow elder and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, because Peter is going to, since he's urging them to do something, he's kind of giving the means of why he's able to. Because a lot of people might read this and they might challenge Peter, of who are you, Peter, to ask me or tell me or urge me to do any of these things. And I want everyone to kind of take a minute to think about, how it feels for someone to kind of tell you to do something. They urge you and they say, oh, well, I think you should, live like this. I think you should be doing this. And think about, the characteristic of that person. I'm sure all of us have had someone telling us how to do things, how to live our lives. And if you're taking notes, I kind of want you to make two categories. Someone who, like with Peter's understanding, he's addressing fellow elders as he's a fellow elder, as he is a witness of Christ's suffering. So basically, Peter is qualified to be able to urge them. So in the first category, it would be someone giving you advice, someone guiding you who is qualified to do so. Someone saying, okay, don't go down this road because I've gone down that road and I know how it leads. Or, this is how you should go. It would be like the difference of getting marriage advice from someone who's married 20 years and then marriage advice for someone who's not even married, or who's been, divorced 20 times. So in the first category, someone who is qualified and someone who's not. And think about just kind of the differences that it makes. What are the big differences getting advice from someone who's not qualified between the difference from someone who is? And so we see when someone who is qualified gives us advice, we receive it better. Such as if Maggie and I were to receive marriage advice from someone, 20 years, even 10, 30, 40, 50, even 50, trying to give us advice about, some of the things that we're maybe doing, or just kind of advice for our marriage, Maggie and I would definitely be more receptive to them because, especially if they're 50 years, they've lasted long. They've gone through quite a bit. 50 years of marriage is quite a long time. And that gives a lot of opportunity for different challenges that they could face, so they would have a lot of experience. Compared to if someone who was unqualified, and say someone who was divorced 20 times and they had a horrible track record, they were getting in and out of marriages really fast and they couldn't keep a solid marriage, and they're trying to give us advice, Maggie and I would honestly have a hard time taking it because their track record of, okay, you've been married on and off so many times, how can we take you seriously? So it helps us to understand why Peter is identifying himself as a fellow elder and a witness of suffering of Christ, because this establishes the respect for the elders among his audience, because he is a fellow elder, so he knows what they're experiencing, what they're having to do, and more importantly, he is an apostle. He has witnessed the suffering of Christ. And in fact, if you remember last week, as we've talked about even more than last week in chapter 4, just the suffering of a Christian and the suffering of Christ. And especially as Peter is addressing for us to suffer just like Christ, again, who better to understand how Christ suffered than someone who's seen it firsthand? And again, it's kind of like the experience of, with me being in the Marine Corps, I can give advice to others who've also been in the Marine Corps or who are thinking of going into the Marine Corps. I can't say so much to the Army or any of the other branches because I wasn't in those branches, but just in the military in general, I can talk about it. But that's the difference between someone, from me, having military experience and then someone who's not. So they don't know. They've never had military experience. What kind of, what can they really tell you having not gone through it? So again, there's just that difference. So Peter wants them to be reassured that he's giving them good advice because he is a fellow elder. He has witnessed the suffering of Christ. And then he continues on and he says, as well as a partaker in the glory that is going to be revealed. So, and again, that partaker kind of has the idea of a partner. So he's talking about sharing in the suffering of Christ. And again, this falls back on something he addressed that we looked last week in chapter 4, when he talked about suffering as a Christian. And he talks about in chapter 4, verse 13, he says, but rejoice insofar as you share Christ's suffering, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. So again, he's just bringing it back to them to understanding that I'm giving you solid advice because I'm going through it as well. I've also suffered for Christ's name. So he's reassuring him that he's not just pulling this out of thin air. He knows what he's talking about. And that's something that really helps reassure people. They say, okay, this is something that I need to listen to because he's gone through all of these things. So Peter, is someone that you want to take advice from, especially as an elder, because, he is an elder. He's witnessed Christ's suffering as well. He's also partaked in the glory that is going to be revealed. He's suffered, as well as he is a man of God. He is a Christian. He has given his life over to Christ. So he is someone that is, that can be trusted and being taken advice from, because he's giving advice that is going to challenge a hard person. And what I mean about that is kind of heart of heart, because he's talking about humility. He's encouraging a lot of humility ideas and being humble rather than prideful. And so that can be a very challenging thing. If someone is prideful, they have a hard heart, kind of a little tongue twister there, and they're very strong-minded, very strong-willed. So it can be hard to sit there and say, hey, as an elder, you need to act like this, because quickly they could say, well, who are you? Who are you to tell me how I should behave? Who are you to tell me what I'm doing is wrong? So again, here is Peter saying, this is who I am. And we saw Paul doing that. If for those of you in Grace Baptist, in my series of Galatians, Paul did that too, especially because his name was being challenged by the false teachers. He had to give himself credentials to help his audience in Galatians to be able to trust what he was writing to be true. So as he's giving into what he's urging them, he says, exercise. He says in verse 2, as elders, they are shepherd the flock of God that is among you. So here we're given the responsibility of an elder. They're to shepherd the flock. They are to tend. They are to care. They are to watch over. So for Grace Baptist Church, myself and the other 3 elders, it is our responsibility to, shepherd the flock, to look out for the congregation, to make sure that we are all growing in Christ, to make sure that, we are connecting with one another, that we're, many different things, that the church is going in a right place, that we're glorifying God, that we're being obedient to him, things like that. So we're shepherding, we're tending. Just think of it, it's a great verbiage of, a shepherd tending to his sheep. The same thing, watching over them, making sure no wolves come to take them away, to make sure that they're not eating anything bad, to tend to them when they're sick. Elders are to do the same, except for instead of sheep, they are people, and they're God's flock. So elders have a special charge, and that is to shepherd the flock. But there's a certain way to do it. There's definitely a right way and a wrong way. And we see, that they're supposed to exercise oversight, but it's not supposed to be out of compulsion, but it's supposed to be willingly. And what Peter means by that, with the understanding of the word that is used for compulsion, it is the idea that something must be done. So it's a whole idea of mindset that don't, be an elder and don't, shepherd and oversight with things, feeling that you need to do it. Kind of almost like well, I need to do this, kind of a selfish mindset, kind of like it's almost a burden. That, okay, well, no one else is going to do this, I better do it. And that's definitely different from the willingness side of it. So again, in your chart with your notes to kind of help understand this idea and get a grasp of it, you just have the compulsion side and the willing side. And starting with the compulsion side, it's, again, more of a forced idea. It's not done with joy. It's more of, I need to do this. It's more of a necessity. There's more of an obligation, which can bring about burnout because the person's not happy about doing it. Again, they feel like they have to do it. It must be done. So there's no joy. And this can create issues because it can cause bitterness. And it kind of really challenges the responsibilities that the elder has. Whereas when you look at the willingness, there is joy because they want to do it. It's not a feeling of, oh, I have to do this. It's a feeling of, oh, I want to do this. And so it's it challenges that burnout, because there can still be burnout, but the enjoyment of it can kind of get them through the rough times, instead of just saying, oh, well, I must do this and I got a headache now and I don't want to do it anymore. Willingness says, I enjoy this, so I'm willing to take the challenges. I'm, doing with this for the right reasons, and this brings me joy. So there's definitely a big difference of it. And Peter is encouraging elders to oversee willingly. Don't do it, if you feel like you're forced. This should be a volunteered position, not a forced position. If you're feeling forced in it, it's not going to be good, because that's going to portray in all of your actions, because you don't want to shepherd people. You're feeling like you're forced. So your hand's kind of forced, and that can create some issues. And again, Peter says, as God would have you. So this is something that God wants elders is to do, to oversee things willingly. And then he talks about not for shameful gain, but eagerly. So again, there's that two categories of a contrast. Don't do it with compulsion, as well as don't do it for shameful gain. So this would be someone who becomes an elder to just maybe get in the limelight, to sit there and look righteous. So they're doing it for more of a self-righteous idea. So they don't want to be an elder to help people. They want to be an elder so that way people think they look good. So that way they can drop their name and say, oh, hey, I'm an elder at this church, or, look at me, look how mature of a Christian I am. So that would be a shameful gain, something that is selfish. Or That could also kind of go inside with the pastor as well. If the pastor is just doing it for money, that's not good, because especially if there's hard times with money, or the money is going to be kind of the root of it all. So if there's shameful gains with being an elder, or a leader of a church, it's going to create issues. But if it's done eagerly, again, there's that whole idea of willingly and eagerly, someone who is excited about doing it, because especially leading people and ministering to people is tough. So if you're not doing it willingly and eagerly during those challenging times, you're just going to get swept away. So it's something that needs to be done with joy, to see the bigger picture of, I'm not doing this for myself, I'm doing this for others. Because those days where you're just getting beat and you're just discouraged, you're reminded again, I'm doing this willingly, I'm doing this not for myself, I'm doing this for other people. So it doesn't matter what I'm getting out of it. It matters what other people are getting from it. And this, again, that mindset is just a big difference. And this is the difference between serving oneself and serving others. And elders, as we'll see, are supposed to set an example, and that is serving others. As Jesus told all his disciples, be last, because last will be first and first will be last. And just as Jesus was also an example himself, he served. He came to serve. He healed. He taught. He didn't come to rule and, cast a heavy hand on everybody. He came and he healed everyone that came to him. He loved and he washed the disciples' feet. He did a lot of things. And especially the biggest thing is he died on the cross for us. So we see that Jesus is just that great example. We have Mary and Joseph Dragon saying hello. So hi, guys. We're glad that you're joining in. And then so continuing in this whole idea of having a proper heart as an elder and mindset, he continues, not domineering over those in your charge, but being example to the flock. So something I already addressed. So it's the idea of not being forceful, not, being a dictator, but more of being, an example, to not just talk the talk, but, walk the walk. So it's very important for elders to kind of have this mindset that it is their job to care, to love, to be the example. And it's not to rule and, make their names known and, to establish a dominance over people. That's not it at all. And even though this is directed towards elders, and it's good for elders to read upon this and, make sure they're challenging themselves to fit this, it's also good for the sheep, I want to say the flock, to ensure that their elders fit this. If your elders are, domineering, if, you start noticing that they're an elder because for selfish gains, or they're doing it more compulsively rather than, something willingly or eagerly, or especially if they're not being an example, then, you have an issue. Because it's their responsibility to tend to the flock. And if they don't have a good heart or a good mind, it's going to cause issues. They're not going to be able to tend to the flock properly. It would be like a shepherd boy, if he's tending to the sheep and he's only doing it because he feels like he has to, a lot can go wrong, and especially if he's not feeling good and a wolf comes by to, steal one of the sheep, he might let it. He might say, well, you know what? I just have to do this. So, the rest are going to be okay. Okay, bye sheep. I'm not really in the mood. Or especially if it's for selfish gains, because, he's doing it for himself. Again, he's maybe going to just do the bare minimum of tending to the sheep. So that way he gets whatever he's doing it for. Rather, if he's doing it willingly, eagerly, he comes to, tend to the flock happily. He comes to love the sheep, and he's willing to save every single one of them. And he won't see one just wander off. So there's that big difference that, is expected of elders. And so he continues on in verse 4 saying, "And when the chief shepherd appears," which he's talking about Jesus, "you will receive the unfading crown of glory." So again, there's just that idea that you will receive, basically what you accountable to your works. If your works are bad and you're, an elder and yet you're doing bad things, we're going to be judged accordingly. But again, if we're serving God and we're, living our lives for Him, we will receive a reward. But also remember that those crowns will be casted at Jesus' feet, because we're also reminded that the only reason that we're able to serve is because He first served us. So again, it's just an ultimately recognizing that the true shepherd, the chief shepherd, is Jesus, who first tended to us, the flock of God. And so in verse 5, Peter takes away the focus from elders and addresses the younger individuals, and he says, "Likewise, you who are younger, be subject to the elders." So it's not just a guidance to just elders, but it's also to the younger individuals as well, that you're expected to follow, the instructions of the elders. It is up to you to learn from them, because if they're going to be eager, if they're going to be willing, and if they're going to shepherd you with, a loving heart, you need to, be subject to them. Because if you're not, and if you're challenging them, and you're being unruly and just kind of being rebellious, then it falls on you, because they're doing their best and they're there trying to tend to you. But if you're just making it hard for them, then you're going to have to answer for that. It's just like how children are supposed to honor their mother and father and listen to them, because hopefully the mother and father have the best interests for the child. They've gone through things. We tell Lizzie to back up from the stove because we know it's hot. So if she doesn't listen to us, she's going to get hurt. So, that's the whole idea of respect and be subject to your elders, because they're trying to help you. They're trying to protect you. And if you don't, then you're being rebellious, and that's not good. And then he comes to a close, saying that clothe yourself, all of you. So, no longer addressing just elders and younger, but everyone. Clothe yourself with humility toward one another. And that's kind of the root of it all. Living in humility, whether it be an elder who is living humbly as, a servant leader who is caring and who, is serving other people, or it's a younger individual who is humble and who's teachable, because the opposite of being humble as a younger person is prideful, thinking that you know it all, thinking you don't need to learn what the elders have. So it all comes down to being humble toward one another. And when either the elders or the younger are doing that, there is harmony, because the elders then are truly being servants. They are not, prideful, doing it for themselves or thinking that, they have the best way, but they're movable, they're teachable still, and they're willing to see how it can be done better. They're allowing God to change them. They're being guided by God, and they're serving the congregation with a open heart and with a loving heart. And again, the younger is also teachable. They're not, they're not hard-headed, thinking that they know everything, saying that, oh, you live in the past, so you can't teach me anything. But they're willing to see what the elders have for them, and they're willing to be guided. So humility is a great important thing, and especially as Peter ends this passage by saying, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And that is a really great point. And ultimately, it can be a point of salvation or not, because accepting Christ really takes a humble humility on one's account, to acknowledge that you have sinned, to acknowledge that you have sinned against God and you are deserving of punishment from Him, is all about humility. Because if you're prideful, you're going to try and dismiss it. You're going to say, oh, well, no, I haven't done anything wrong. Or how dare God try and, and say I've done anything wrong. Or you can make all the excuses you want. But with humility, you realize, oh, I have done something wrong. I am poor in spirit. I am a sinner, and I am dead spiritually. And so then you come to Jesus humbly, accepting that the only way to salvation is through his sacrifice, admitting that there's nothing that we can do, which again is a very humbling thing. If we're too prideful, we're going to say, no, I can do it. I know a way. I will work as hard as I can. I'm not going to let someone else do it for me. So again, there's that big difference of we need to be humble as Christians, not prideful, because even Christ was humble. So it's really just living that humble life. And so when we look at this passage, it's just that idea of, ensuring that we're walking in humility every day, because it can be easy to become a little hard-headed. It can be easy to get prideful, especially as we grow more mature in our faith. It is very easy to start thinking, okay, well, I know more than other people. They definitely don't know more than me. I know what's best. And at times when we become prideful in that sense, someone who is younger may have a good idea, and we may just shut it down saying, no, you've only been a Christian for so many years. I've been it 3 times more. You can't instruct me. And that's not a very loving thing. That's not a matter of humility. So we have to remind ourselves, whether we are an elder, whether it be age-wise or spiritual-wise or younger, to be humble. And so for those who are watching this, if you are an elder or a leader of your church, or, leader in any regards, it is important to have a servant heart, to have that heart who is wanting to serve willingly and eagerly. Because I would have to say, as a pastor for a little over a year, with all the challenges that I've even had, it would be hard if I had a domineering spirit, if I was doing it just for myself, because what gets me through the church politics and the stress of things is knowing that I'm not doing it for myself, but I'm doing it first most because God wants me to do it, but at the same time because there are people that I'm serving. So it brings me ultimate joy because I'm doing it willingly, because I'm doing it eagerly to serve other people. And so there's that big difference. I know that in the past when I've done jobs, just because I needed a job, going through stressful times, I would get burnt out and I would just become very stressed, and it would be have a very negative impact on my health. So there is that difference. And sometimes we see that in the world when an elder is put there because they're forced. It doesn't bode well, both for the church as well as the individual. So we have to make sure as churches that our elders are there because they want to be, and they're also to make sure that they're qualified. Because again, just because someone may have been a Christian for 20 years, maybe doesn't mean they're qualified, because maybe they haven't taken the time to grow. Maybe they're still living a life that, is kind of for themselves. So, again, it's the heart of the character. Who are they serving? Are they serving themselves, or are they serving God? Do they care about serving the church, or do they care about their own agenda? So as an elder, that's something that, elders have to question their hearts on. And as a church, that's something that needs to be followed through with the elders of, what are you doing? How are you tending to us? And so as a congregation, that's something that, continually needs to be challenged to the elders of, are you tending to us? Make sure to care for us, because we are the flock of God and we need tending to, and it's your job. So to make sure to challenge the elders to, make sure that they are guiding, that they are leading, that they are caring for the welfare, because if the church is stagnant and it's not going anywhere, that's not good. So again, it's also just beneficial for those who aren't elders to kind of look and say, okay, this is what I should hold my elder to, because Peter's doing the same thing, and so I need to kind of challenge and make sure that they're following to this, as well as being younger, to make sure to be subjective, to make sure to listen, and just no matter what, being humble. Because especially we live in a world that is very prideful, that demands its own way, demands that they identify what's true for themselves, and pride is just really rooted in that. As Christians, we have to break from that, and we have to make sure that we are serving one another. So we have to definitely make sure that we're not living the example of the world, but first and foremost, the example that Christ gave us, just as Peter identified Jesus as the chief shepherd, because he is who we're supposed to follow as an example of what does it look like to be humbled. The King of all kings who came, in a lowly standing. So he is the first one that we look at. And as we continue next week in our series, kind of coming close to a close of First Peter, we're going to continue looking at that whole idea about humility. So it's something to really get good at working at. It can be hard at times, but that's what God desires for all of his children, to be humbled at heart, because then it helps us to work with each other. It helps us to be reasonable with one another. So hopefully you have found this time that we've had together beneficial. I hope that everyone watching here is able to come on Sunday and watch. We will still be doing a live stream. Make sure to also join us for Sunday, as I will be talking about the phases of that the church will go through as we are working our way towards reopening. So if you haven't watched, I did post a video about kind of giving a church update, so please watch that. Our church members should be have received a call by Gary Rigsby, so hopefully you've talked to him. If not, give him a call. But I hope you all have a good week. Please watch Sunday, where we are going to continue in the Beatitudes with Matthew, where Jesus is we're talking about blessed, and we're going to look deep into what does it mean to hunger? What does it mean to thirst for righteousness? And just looking into that. So I hope you all have a good rest of your week, and hopefully that you're able to wake up glorifying God each day. Have a great night. Bye-bye.